excited today. I'm excited to introduce Elder Genein Letford to speak with us today. She's such an incredible, creative mind. She is leading the charge of creativity for this generation, and I just can't wait to hear the message that she has for us today. So without further ado, please put your hands together for Genein Letford.
What a powerful prayer and a powerful word. Thank you. Thank you for all those prayers. Thank you. And I hope this message supports that as well. Really quick, get one object in your hand now. Go. One object. Try to see if it could be an object that only you can hold. Those of you in TV land watching through the live stream, get an object as well. You're going to need that a little bit later. So does everyone have one object in their hand? Okay, so set it aside. Set it aside, and I'll have you pick that up when we are ready. Dry bones, when Candace was praying that, there's a song called This is the Sound of the Dry Bones Rattling. And that just came to me. It was like I just saw everything. So thank you for that. Would you pay $1 million for this? There's little scratches on here, like just little marks of colored pencil. Well, I would, because this was the first drawing that my son made for me. And so something that is worthless to you could be very full of value to someone else, depending on how you know the story behind it, right? And it opens up into a, and it says Happy Mother's Day last year. And so let's say that, what's your name? Right here in the, yes. Tiffany, that's right, Tiffany, yes. Let's say, Tiffany and I are very, very good friends, but I just throw paint on this canvas, and I'm like, here, right? And you saw me just put it together and just give it to you. What value would that be to you? Like, Genein, you didn't even spend any time on it, right? But let's say, I'm like, Tiffany and I have been friends for 10 years, and I just love her commitment to our friendship. She knows me. That person in your life that just calls you when they need to call you, right? And they finish your sentences. You just vibe. And I'm like, Tiffany, I just want to create something for you just to reflect our friendship. And it takes me like 6 months, and I just think about all the things that you've been to me and all the valleys and the mountain peaks that we've been through together, and I put it on this canvas, and then I give it to you. Like, how would you, I know, like, how would that make you feel? Like now when you look at this canvas, right, it's a whole other experience. Because I put my essence into it, and I really contemplated on what you mean to me, and I put it on something and extracted it from myself, my essence, and I gave it to you. I want you to understand that I created that for Tiffany. But now I need you to understand what God has created for you, right? And I can speak to Tiffany about our relationship from me interacting with this canvas and putting everything on this canvas. I can communicate to her on another platform, right? And so today I just want to awaken you on different ways that God is communicating to you. Anjali had a great word this morning about being a watchman, right? And so my message today may sound kind of harsh, but here it is. It's called Pay Attention. Okay? If you're the note scripter like I am, you have titles and everything's color-coded on your notes. That's me. But the title is Pay Attention, because God is speaking to you, especially now as you see things are shifting on all these platforms and all these levels within your life, your family, your community, your nation, and your world. Things are shifting, but are we paying attention? So I'm going to quickly talk about different ways that God is speaking to you and how you can implement them into your life. I asked for the song, So Will I, the second song that was sung today, to be played. Because God speaks through his word, like Candace said. God speaks through images, through your imagination. If you look at the word imagination, imagination, right? And God speaks through creation. And that's what we're going to focus on today. You've heard me allude to it in previous talks, but I really want to dig deep today and see what that looks like. The So Will I song. It says, I'm going to read some lyrics to you, the ones that Candace said. It says, I can see your heart in everything you made. If it all reveals your nature, so will I. Right? I can see your heart in everything you made, every painted sky, a canvas of your grace. If creation still obeys you, so will I. And so I feel that God has been giving people their canvases, but they haven't been paying attention. And the reason why that song is so poignant, and I hope you guys go download it later on, because I do have some homework for you, is to listen to that song again. And where it says, I can see your heart in everything you say, every burning star, a signal fire of grace. If creation sings your praises, so will I. And my question to you, once again, is how are you interacting with one of God's canvases to you? How are you really letting God communicate to you through his creation? If you turn to Genesis 1 and 14, it says, God said, let lights appear in the sky to separate the day from the night. Let them be signs to mark the seasons. And so when Anjali says, I feel this is a season of watchmen, people taking their posts and watching, are you marking the seasons of your signs? Are you marking the signs of your seasons? Are you paying attention to the signs that God is bringing to you? Are you? Yes or no? Here's the question. Let's see. I do a lot of cross-reference research. I'm that brain nerd, and I also do a lot of Hebraic study. So I love to see what the Old Testament, what the Torah says in the Hebrew, but I also love to see what science says. And science is just a word that means to know. All right, to know, to come to knowing. And one way that we're not truly paying attention to the signs that God is giving us is because sometimes our brain sees that there's too much stimulation going on. And so we have this concept called adaptive ignorance, right? Where your brain is really just focusing on what it needs to focus for that particular reason. And it says that your brain says, it asks what's relevant right now, and it gears us up to notice only that. And it also makes us inhabit a largely unlived and unremembered life day in and day out. And I want to make known that this is a strategy of the enemy to get you distracted. Once again, look at that word, distracted, right? Disaction. To get you distracted on focusing on what you shouldn't be focusing on. Another thing said by William James, who is an author, he said, my experience is what I agree to attend to. Only those items which I notice shape my mind. And so that's another reason why us paying attention to what God has us paying attention to is key. Everyone hold up your object that I asked you to get out. And quickly, tell me what that object is. Go. All right. Now I'm going to give you about 5 seconds, right? Now find 2 things on that object that you never noticed before. Go. Find 2 things on the object that you have had with you this whole time that you never noticed before. I want you to observe. I want you to observe the object. What's one or two things you never noticed before? Are you finding one or two things you never noticed before? Observe your object. Who found one or two things that you never noticed before? What's your thing? Oh, so that she said there's a flower on the front of her Fiji water, right? And there's a cloud on the back. Okay, so she noticed her glasses that she's had with her, but she noticed that they need to be adjusted. So I can go on and ask for things, but did everyone find one or two things that you never noticed before? So the object that's been with you this whole time, sometimes maybe for a day, maybe for weeks, some of you for years, there's things that you never noticed before. And so I want to bring up two words. Everyone say recognition and observation. Recognition is your brain just quickly recognizing it, and it already built a schema for it, so it doesn't have to dig deep. But when you observe comes from the Latin. It means to attend to. What are you paying attention to? And observe isn't just seeing. A lot of times you think that to observe means just seeing. Observe means you are utilizing all of your senses, your smells. Like who smelled their object? Anyone? Like, okay, your hearing, your taste, and you don't have to put anything in your mouth, and your touch. When someone observes, they're using all of their senses to get all of the data around. And so what my experience is what I agree to attend to. And so I feel God is asking for this season, what are you giving your attention to? And are you recognizing something or are you observing it? Because something could be in your face for years and you never truly interact with it and extract from it what God is trying to get to you. And I feel God is sending us messages that we are walking past every day. And that is going to be costly for us if we don't truly get this. At my home, I've been living at my place for about 10 years. And my son just came to us about 3 years ago. He's 3.5 now. And I remember doing walks along the property before he was born. And as a 2-year-old, walking with him is a whole other experience. Have you ever taken a walk with a 2-year-old before or with a small child? And suddenly a 15-minute walk turns to an hour-and-a-half walk. Do you know why? Because they observe. They're observing. Right? They're putting things in their mouth. They're feeling things with different parts of their hands, and they're staring at the snail for 15 minutes. I'm like, Sean, come on. It's a snail. But to him, it's a snail. It's a snail. It's God's creation. And what that showed me was the curiosity that he put into it. God was speaking to him. God was in awe of his awe of something that he created. He was observing. And it forced me to get back into that mindset. Does that make sense? To observe. And the cool thing about that is when you really stop and look at where you're paying attention, God starts talking even more. And God starts revealing even more. And it is mind-blowing that when I increase my observation, it increased my sensitivity. And if you turn to Numbers 9:15, here's one reason why you want it to increase your sensitivity. Are you at Numbers? Are you at Numbers? All right. Numbers 9:15. It says, on the day the tabernacle was set up, the cloud covered it. From the evening until morning, the cloud over the tabernacle looked like a pillar of fire. This was the regular pattern, a pillar of fire. At night, the cloud that covered the tabernacle had the appearance of fire. Whenever the cloud lifted from over the sacred tent, the people of Israel would break camp and follow it. And wherever the cloud settled, the people of Israel would set up camp. In this way, they traveled and camped at the Lord's command wherever he told them to go. Then they remained in their camp as long as the cloud stayed over the tabernacle. If the cloud remained over the tabernacle for a long time, the Israelites stayed and performed their duty to the Lord. Sometimes the cloud would stay over the tabernacle for only a few days. So the people would stay only for a few days as the Lord commanded. Then, at the Lord's command, they would break camp and move on. Sometimes the cloud stayed overnight and then lifted the next morning. But day or night, when the cloud lifted, the people broke camp and moved. Whether the cloud stayed above the tabernacle for 2 days, a month, a year, the people of Israel stayed in camp and did not move on. But as soon as it lifted, they broke camp and moved on. So they camped and traveled at the Lord's command, and they did whatever the Lord told them through Moses. Did you see the clouds this morning? Did anyone see the clouds? And so my question to you is, does God still speak through his creation? And is that a part of our ability to hear what he's saying? Because when I read that, I'm like, wow, they had to be in tune. They had to be aware. They had to be seeing what's going on, and they had to move when the cloud moved. What if there's that one person who's not paying attention, and the cloud moved and everyone moved and they're still sleeping in? Have you ever been in a situation in your life where you just feel intuitively that the cloud has moved on, and like you just feel it? And you're like, I think it's time to move, right? And so metaphorically, the cloud has shifted. And so here, there's that actual connection to the physical, like looking at the cloud. God actually gave them a physical cloud. But is God still communicating to us through creation? And that's really what I want us to think about, is are we really paying attention to how God is speaking to us? So that's the question that I have for you today. When I was doing research, I asked, Lord, are you speaking through the weather? Are you speaking through your animals? Are you speaking through your systems and your cycles that you put into place, that you built for us? And the question is, are there metaphorical messages embedded within his creations that are just for us? Have you read Proverbs? Do you see how many examples of God using his creations to teach us lessons? And so sometimes before I really understood this, we would just kind of surface read. Have you ever just kind of surface read, right? And you close the book and you don't even really remember what you read. And so I felt God talking to me about the wisdom, extracting the wisdom out of really think about what he's using to teach us lessons. And here is Paul saying that we need to be aware of that. Could you turn to Romans? And I don't know if anyone actually has a physical Bible. Everyone has their phone, right? In Romans chapter 1, verse 19, Paul says they know the truth about God because he had made it obvious to them. For ever since the world was created, people have seen the earth and sky. Through everything God made, they can clearly see his invisible qualities, his external power and divine nature. So they have no excuse for not knowing God. This is Paul saying, you know God, you see him every day, but are you paying what? Attention. Are you paying attention? Here's what it looked like in my life when I really asked myself, am I paying attention? Last year, there were 2 earthquakes. Who's ever experienced an earthquake, right? If you live in California, it's a part of how we lived. But I started paying attention. One of the earthquakes was on a Jewish, I don't know if it's a holiday, but a Jewish day of mourning called, which had just passed a few weeks ago, Tisha B'Av, which is the 9th of Av, and it's the day that they mourn the destruction of the temples. And I wouldn't have made that connection had I not been paying attention of when the earthquake happened here in San Fernando Valley and what was going on the calendars, the Gregorian calendar that we follow and the Jewish calendar. And then I realized the second earthquake that happened in Southern California was on Rosh Hashanah last year, right? And this would have totally escaped me had I not been paying attention to one way. God speaks in many ways. I'm not saying this is the only way God can speak to you, but in one way that God could be communicating to me. And I don't know about you, but I'm not trying to miss any messages because I need all the help that I can get in this thing we called life, right? So if God's trying to get things to the Letford family, I need to make sure all of the routes are clear and are open. So with the earthquakes, and watch, you guys are all going to be like writing down, the earthquake was, 4.2 and it happened at 4:38. Now I do that. I just write it down. It may not mean anything. Okay, that's fine. But at least I have the data in case I see a pattern. Okay? Rainbows. Who's seen a rainbow? Who know God talks through rainbows? Who loves rainbows? And that could mean something. Anjali said she saw one yesterday. I live in the home that I'm in now, and there's a rainbow that goes through the peephole because my door faces the east. It goes through the peephole and hits the wall, right? I may have seen it, ignored it for 8 years until, once again, I have a 2-year-old that says, whoa, there's a rainbow on the wall. Blows his mind. And so I'm like, okay, well, let me investigate, right? Curiosity is the key. Curiosity is huge with God, and that's why you see those paragraphs in the Bible that talk about come like a little child. There's so many perspectives from that one, but that's one of them, the curiosity of the child. God wants us to implement that same curiosity. But when you look at rainbows, the first thing that comes to mind is the Noah's Ark, right? And the rainbow that he got as a sign of the covenant, and that won't happen again. But in my deeper studies, another meaning is rainbows mean that God is with you. God is with you. And so because I'm learning this now in my 40s, I get to teach my child who is 3. And so every time he sees the rainbow on his wall, or he sees it around, or he sees a reflection in the grass or whatever, from the sprinklers, he says, God is with me. And so now that's a part of his identity, that he is receiving the messages from God through the canvas. God put a rainbow on his canvas. And so, Anjali, I believe that's for you too. If you saw a rainbow yesterday, that's just God reminding you. I got you covered, and meaning, here's another thing, I got you covered. When you look up, what do you see? If you go outside, it's not a trick question. When you go outside, when you look up, what do you see? And what color is the sky? Actually, the sky is clear. Because of refraction and reflection and the particles in the atmosphere, you're perceiving the color blue. But when I see a rainbow, it's just a prism separating the light. So whenever you're in sunlight, you are surrounded by all the colors. You just can't perceive it unless you have a prism of some sort. Water acts as a prism. A diamond acts as a prism. That's why you can see rainbow colors in any type of prisms that you have around you. So every time you walk outside, you're surrounded by rainbows. But when you look up at the sky, which is not just blue, at the sunrise and sunset, and I watched the sunrise this morning as I was praying over this word, and you see darkness, dark blue, and then you see a little bit of light blue, and then you see that those oranges come through, right? Because of the atmosphere and how the sunlight's reacting with the atmosphere. But you see blue most of the time. Why is that? Why didn't God choose green for the sky color? Have you ever asked that question? Or were you just recognizing the sky and not observing and being curious about it? Apparently, I have a curiosity person over there who did ask that question. But the rest of us, we just assume that that's just the way it is, right? And so I asked, okay, God, what is this blue thing? What's blue? Does blue have any significance in your foundational word, right? And do you know what blue means? Or blue? Yes, blue. I always come to her because she knows her stuff. But oh no, what blue means Hebraically, right? Blue is a very important color in the Hebrew Bible. If you look at in the Torah, which is, when I say Torah, I just mean the first five books of the Bible, they talk about tassels. And God is like, I want you to wear these tassels, and I want these tassels to be blue. And when you look at the instructions that God gave them for covering and packing up the tabernacle, right? Because they were on the move, right? When the cloud moves, you move, and when when it's time to move, you got to move. So God gave them instructions to pack the tabernacle, and guess was the top covering of the ark? What color was it? And so in my research, you look at the whole caravan of the Israelites moving, and you see it all, and at the top you see the blue. And so there's a person I study under, and he has a video series, and it's called The Color of Heaven. And he talked about the blue. And if you read a lot of different places, it talks about the blue, the throne room, or like the blue and the sapphire, right? You see a lot of blues popping up in the Torah, in the first 5 books of the Bible. And when I look at the sky now, because of that connection, I feel that God's saying, to me at least, and you can interpret this as any way you want to, but that God's got me covered. God has got you covered. God has got you covered. So there's so many ways that God is talking to you. And the last example that I have, because I love the abstractness of what I'm saying, but I love to bring it down into the implementation. So you can leave here just a little bit more aware of things that are already happening around you. When this just happened last week. I was coming down the stairs with my son, and a butterfly just landed on one of the stairs. And we stopped because I didn't want to step on it, but it was a full-form butterfly. And it just landed, like it's never done that before. It just landed, posted, like, what's up? And it just stared at us, right, for a good, 3 seconds, which is a long time for an insect just to be there, especially a butterfly. And then it just got up and flew away. And I was like, that's interesting. Every time you say that's interesting, be mindful of that. Because of this, I'm going to read, but let me finish the butterfly story. So then I quickly remembered a week before, my son and I were taking a walk in a neighborhood, and there was a butterfly on the ground, and he, or she, or it, didn't move at all, but it wasn't hurt, but it was there. And I wondered if its wings were wet, why wasn't it flying? But we just, looked at it, prayed for it, and kept going. And then the day that we walked down the stairs, and it just stayed there, and then it flew away. Later on that same day, I was driving, and a butterfly almost ran into the car, and then flew away. So when things like this happen, what's the title of the message? Pay attention. And so I'm like, okay, well, what do butterflies mean? Why are butterflies coming at you? Now, the scientific, coincidence thing is just say, okay, well, that's a coincidence. Maybe Genein spring. Butterflies are abundant in spring because of the cycles of when they're born. You could say that, but I want to go deeper. Is God speaking something to me? And so I looked up butterflies, and the Greek word for butterfly is psyche. That's where we get our word psychology from, and all the other words that start with psyche. And I have a young student here, right? But who knows the life cycle of a butterfly, right? Everyone had to learn that because that's standard, right? You got the eggs and the pupa, and everyone says cocoon, but cocoon is the moths. The butterflies have what? Chrysalises, okay? So don't say cocoon. It's a chrysalis, okay? So, but you have the larva, and then the chrysalis, and then they have to struggle out the chrysalis, and I've heard a lot of great talks about the struggle, right, and why you need struggle to strengthen the wings in order to fly. And so God can be communicating to you about stages of your life by having a butterfly land on your shoulder. But you're going to miss it if you don't what? Pay attention. You can tell him to pay attention. All right? It's the teacher in me, all right? I'm a teacher for 15 years. You can't just let it go. It's me. All right, and if I knew names, I always say names. Like, Tiffany, do you agree with me? That's just what we do. So are we paying attention? And especially, this may be just me, but there's numerical evidence for this. When things happen in threes for me, that's a huge thing. So wait, I saw a butterfly a week before, and then we almost stepped on the butterfly how, and then the butterfly almost, whoa, what is going on? God, are you speaking to me through your creations, through a canvas? right? And so some people say, oh, Genein, you're overthinking. And I've gotten that before. You know, I'm just trying to make connections. Oh, you're overthinking stuff. Oh, whatever. It's just a coincidence. And there's a man named Rabbi Daniel Lapin, and he has a book called Business Secrets of the Bible, and I love it. It's for Christians and Jewish people. He acknowledges both, but he wants people to extract the embedded lessons and apply them to their business. And what he says is, they're not coincidences, they're clues. He said there's no Hebrew word for coincidence. There is no Hebrew word for coincidence. He says it's contrary to God's plan, calling it a coincidence, because it conceals God's involvement in the world. There are no accidents. Oh, and he sounds like he's yelling at me. I'm like, oh my goodness. He's like, there is no accidents, only connections that you fail to observe. Just because you failed to notice when God is conveying something to you does not make the message to you a coincidence. What we think of as coincidence is usually nothing more than God camouflaging his purpose. There is a reason and for every single thing that has and ever will happen. Seek to discover what that reason is instead of chalking it up to coincidence. Albert Einstein said, coincidences are God's way of remaining anonymous, right? And so that right there caused me to stop saying, oh, well, that was random. Like, so every time I was like, that's weird. That makes me curious to investigate instead of chalking it up to coincidence, because possibly God may be sending me a message. And so I'm asking you on God's creation that he put all around you, right? The same way I put my whole essence to communicate a friendship between Tiffany and I, has God used his creation to communicate between you and him? That's the question I want you to think about. And here's why I am adamant about us growing our metaphorical skills. So when I see a butterfly, metaphorically, what is that butterfly telling me? What can I apply? How can I think metaphorically, which a metaphor is you're taking the functions and the wisdom of one item and you're attributing it to another item. And I'm going to tell you about the word parabola. Can you say parabola? Does anybody remember what a parabola is? Yes, it is. Looks like this. I should have just had this pre-drawn. So you're probably like, Genein, why are you bringing 10th grade geometry up into the sermon? Do you remember parabolas? Right? I think I got a B in this class, so I just tried to just get through it. The word parabola, I was like, that's interesting. The word parabola is connected to a way that Jesus spoke. Who knows what word I'm thinking about? Parable. They come from the same root word. The same root word of a parabola is parable, parabola. And it means placing side by side. Placing side by side. Could you find John 12:44 for me? Could you find John 12:44 for me? And this is the solidifier of some of my point. It says, Jesus shouted to the crowds, if you trust me, you are trusting not only me, but also God who sent me. For when you see me, you are seeing the one who sent me. I have come as a light to shine in this dark world so that all who put their trust in me will no longer remain in the dark. God's saying, when I give you my parables, they're side by side. I'm telling you the story, but there's the invisible part, right? That's going on the other side. And so when you are hearing a parable, you are trying to get the wisdom, the metaphorical wisdom that's going on the other side. God is speaking to you in parables, or Jesus spoke in parables. God is speaking to you in parables because God is showing you the visible to make the invisible now visible. Does that make sense? So when God is speaking to you through his creations, that's what's visible. But he wants you to do the little bit of extra work, to be curious, to see what's going on the other side of the axis. I should have asked you, what is that vertical line called, right? And so there is movement, there's wisdom, there's work on the other side that we can't see. We can only see a butterfly landing at your feet. We can only see the rainbow in the sky. We can only see the blueness, perceive the blueness, even though there's all the colors of the rainbow in the sky. But we can only perceive the blue. What is going on the invisible side? And so I'm very adamant with all the research that I learn and that I corroborate with other research to make sure it's sound. Once it's sound and I'm like, okay, this is it, I teach it to my son. And so when we go on our walks, I'm like, Sean, this is a tree. This is a tree. God made this tree just for you. But we look metaphorically at the tree. What is the tree giving you so you can survive? And that's a big word right now with COVID, right? Because oxygen is one of those things like, who woke up today and say, oh, I hope I have enough oxygen today? Most of us here did not, but there are people who are. Oxygen is one of those things that you take for granted until you don't have access, right? And so I say, Sean, this tree is giving us oxygen. This tree is giving you shade. This tree is giving you fruit. You can have a whole talk on fruit, right? And so I'm making him aware that you're just not going to come out the house and get in the car and be oblivious to how God is connecting with you. And we're all connected. If all the trees stopped giving oxygen at the same time, we would all be in trouble. Yet we walk past them every day and don't even acknowledge them. And so I tell Sean, look at the mountains. Thank God for the mountains. Aren't they beautiful? And I'm because he's in his formative years, I'm training him to think that way, that God is always thinking about him. If it's the placement of a tree or the beauty of a butterfly or the song of a bird, God just wants to bring joy into his life and bring oxygen into his life and fruit, right? Every vegetable you cut on your cutting board came from the earth. It came from God's creation, and it's time for us to make that reconnection because God can get us wisdom through that way. And so there's so many ways to feel the love of God and to feel the wisdom of God and to hear from him. And here is something that Chief Rabbi Warren Goldstein wrote. He said, when a person reflects on God's deeds and wondrous and the great creations, and sees from them his wisdom, which is beyond assessment and without end, this will bring him to the love and to the praise and to the glory and to be filled with the great desire to know his great name. When I'm curious about why does a snail have a spiral, I'm curious about God's creation. And then I get to see even more. And that's why I love that song. Everyone has homework tonight to go listen to that, So Will I, 100 billion, 1,000 million ways, right? Whatever it's called. But I need you to interact with those lyrics a little bit deeper. And then you'll see it. And then he said, as Jewish people, we take nothing for granted, to attune our consciousness to the wondrous things going on around us. There are blessings on witnessing lightning, on hearing thunder, on seeing the oceans or an awesome mountain range, on noticing a rainbow and its brilliant colors or the first blossoms of spring. Everything is a message to us. But are we paying attention? That is the question. And one way to work on paying attention is to do something that I have started doing last year, but you may have heard about it. It's called the Sabbath, and taking time to just stop. Just stop. And there's a few reasons why the Sabbath is done, and you can do a whole 3-hour talk on that, but I'm just going to quickly go over a few things. God knows we need to connect with him, and he knows how busy life is. He knows how distractions can be, right? Technology can be, just the woes of the world and everything that we have in our lives going on. but he also knows the importance of us stopping and just being, right? Stopping and being. And the two main points of the Sabbath, at least in my research that I found, is to reconnect to creation, almost that Eden experience, correct? And to reflect on the freedom from slavery. Those are the two big points that is focused on when they celebrate the Sabbath. And it's interesting that the Sabbath is one of the things in the Ten Commandments. Yet no one, you'll never hear anyone say, hey, I lied today. I lied 15 times a day. What? I lied, or I murdered. You don't hear people celebrating breaking the other commandments, right? But you hear people celebrating breaking that commandment. Like, hey, I'm working 24/7. I'm hustling all the time. I'm 3 hours of sleep. I'm working every day. And what you're saying is you had no time to stop and just breathe. And here's the neuroscience behind that, because as I study the neuroscience in the brain, I'm like, wow, God, you're all in that. Like, you knew. Of course he knew, because he invented the brain, right? But your brain has several networks going on. You have the focus network, and that network is turned on when you are focused on something, such as doing bills, filling out spreadsheets, your focus. You know, when your brain gets into that focus mode? When you're focused, your innovation network is turned down. Your innovation network is the network that switches on when you're daydreaming, when you're staring at the sky wondering what that cloud could be. Is it an elephant? Could it be a monkey? Could it be my taxes? Like whatever you think it could be. When you're staring out the window, when your ideas are flowing in your mind, that is when your innovation network is on, and both networks can't be on and high at the same time. And the reason why I believe, personally, Sabbath is so important, in addition to the connection, is because your innovation network has more of an opportunity to be turned on. And I believe that that's when the Holy Spirit can come in more and give you those images, right? A lot of us hear from the Holy Spirit through images, right? And those images can come on more when your innovation network is on. So when you take time, and if you can't do it, I do it mine from Friday night to Saturday. Some people do it from on Sunday. Some people do it on a Wednesday. I mean, that's between you and God. But I challenge you to finish out 2021 trying to increase the amount of times that you just stop. Stop and stare. And it's hard, trust me, especially when you're like me and you're like a workaholic. It's hard. And we're in a society that glorifies workaholics. So it's hard to go against the grain. But trust me, if you want to go to the next level in your relationship with God and also your creativity, your innovation network has to be turned on more often than not. And I want you to turn to Luke 22. Luke 22. Luke 22. So when you are now going through life, right, and now you hopefully from what I've said so far, you've been aware of different ways that God communicates with you just as you going through life. I want to show you, as Candace encouraged you to get more into the Word, I want to show you what this could look like in the Word as well. Luke 22, verse 7. It says, now the festival of the unleavened bread, which is Passover, arrived when the Passover lamb was sacrificed. Jesus sent Peter and John ahead and said, go and prepare the Passover meal so we can eat it together. And then they said, well, where do you want us to prepare it? And he replied, okay, listen up. As soon as you enter Jerusalem, a man carrying a pitcher of water will meet you. Follow him, and at the house he enters, say to the owner, the teacher says, the teacher asks, where is the guest room where I can eat the Passover meal with my disciples? He will take you upstairs to a large room that is already set up. This is where you should prepare the meal. They went off to the city and found everything as Jesus said, and they prepared the Passover meal there. There's so many sermons that you can get from that of, like preparation and things like that. But who has a question about that passage? What stood out to you at the beginning of the passage? Anything? Here's what stood out to me. He replied, "As soon as you enter to Jerusalem, a man carrying a pitcher of water will meet you." Did that spark any questions in anyone? Like, what? Wait, pretend you're the disciples. Wait, you want me to go into one of the largest towns, the capital, or Jerusalem? Yes, is Jerusalem the capital? No, yes, I don't know. To a large town. I know, I keep looking at you. I'm so sorry. But wait, you want me to find a random person with a pitcher of water? So Jesus is setting them on a scavenger hunt, basically, right? Okay, I want you to find a man with blue socks, and then he's going to ask you to throw the ball over the wall and then go to the person with the red bottle of oil and then ask that. It's just like, what? And so I want you to interact with the word like that. Just don't gloss over things, because everything is done with intention. There's no, especially if you read the Torah, there's no like random filler words. Every word, especially in the Hebrew, every word and every size of the letter, and I mean, there's so many layers to this, it takes multiple lifetimes to get through. But everything is put there for a purpose. So I'm not going to go over that, but I want you to practice when you read. Picture things in your mind and then stop and say, why is there a random man with a pitcher of water? What is the significance of water? Like, why is this person here? And then go on to the rest of the passage. But spend time. You can spend a whole week on why you need to find somebody with a pitcher of water. What does that mean? What does that mean? I still don't know. I'm actually asking you, what does that mean? I'm like, but that just dawned on me that you can live your life that way when you're out and about. And then you can also interact with the word that way. Start to see things that don't make sense and then ask, well, God, what? And then pray. God will give you revelations. Why did I go have to find a person with a pitcher of water? Why not a pitcher of Kool-Aid? Why not Pepsi? Why? And then God will add the other pieces to make sense. And my last point before I close out is you are getting messages from God's creation, correct? All the time. But guess what? You're God's creation too. You are a messenger carrier as well. And God has given you authority above the animals, right? And God put you in place to take care of the animals and the plants and the earth, which hopefully we can do a better job doing for our children and our grandchildren. That's a whole other talk. But Psalms 139 says, and King David was very adamant about this and emotional. He said, "You created my inmost being. You knit me together in my mother's womb." You are a creation of God. The first question I want to ask is, are you just recognizing yourself? Or are you observing yourself? And as we move into this next era, it's the uniqueness of you that God needs you to really start observing with all of your senses, your intuition, your spiritual senses, your creative senses, so you can get a more defined view of your purpose, as opposed to recognizing yourself and thinking you're like everyone else. Right? And so you are a creation of God. They're a creation of God. They're a creation of God. Are we recognizing other people, or are we observing other people? Ooh. Dun, dun, dun. There's something to really ponder over. Do we truly observe others, or do we just recognize them? Oh, that's Sally from accounting, and you just think Sally is just a good numbers person, and you have no other idea of her other facets, that she's a diamond and she has so many facets to offer the community or the organization or your family, but we just have recognized her as Sally the accountant, and that's all that she can do. And so we're losing out on the beauty and uniqueness of our fellow brothers and sisters because we're recognizing them and we're not observing them. So are we paying? I can't hear you. Are we paying attention? There's a story that I'm going to share. I normally don't share a lot, and because I'm teaching, God has given me permission. But if you're out there helping those in need, it's between you and God about sharing, and the Bible's pretty clear about that. But I'm sharing for reasons to teach. I was going to downtown Los Angeles, and they have a subway now. Like, what? We have a subway, yay, right? And I remember going, and it was bustling with people, and I was going down into the subway, and there was a man standing there, a young man, a young African-American man, slight afro, light eyes, I remember, and he was just standing there, almost like just staring into space, like lost, right? And quickly assessing his garb, I'm assuming that he could have been experiencing homelessness. And then I just, went over, and then it just something told me to stop. Don't you love it when folks say that, which true and well. Something told me to stop, but I just felt the need to just stop, and so I just went to him. I just said, "Are you okay?" And then he was kind of like jarred, like what? And then we just spoke, and I just asked him his name. His name was Michael. And I just spoke to him for a little bit. And I don't even know if I had anything to give him. I forgot, it was a while ago. But I remember just wishing him well. And then I was leaving, and I was going down the subway, and I looked back. And he was looking at me like intensely. And almost like his eyes says, I can't believe she saw me. And then I gave my Forrest Gump wave. Because I didn't, because that's me, right? God wants you to be uniquely you, and I was just like, okay, bye, But he just kept staring at me, and I could see it. It was like it was written on his eyes. I can't believe she saw me. And so there's a Hebrew word that says T-Z-E-L-E-M, Tzelem Elohim. Tzelem Elohim is like the divine spark, because if God made you in his image, right? It says that. God made you in his image. So God made you a creator. God made the canvas of you. But God put the divine spark in everyone. And so it's our job to help people flourish that divine spark. But when you are in a position where people walk past you every day and ignore your spark, there's a compound cost to being ignored. Few of us don't like when we send an email and no one gets back to us, right? Or you get jaded, like, I can't believe she ignored me. Like, what? I got ghosted. She ghosted me, right? Especially depending on what industry you're in. You deal with getting ghosted and not getting callbacks and stuff. And after a while, you just deal with it because it's a part of the job. But imagine just in your everyday life getting ignored every single day. That no one even acknowledges the fact that you're a human being. That is, taking down your everything, your identity, your encouragement, and your Tzelem Elohim, your divine spark. We are ignoring the divine spark, the image of God that he placed on every person. Are we just recognizing them, or are we observing them? Are we at least, you may not have anything to give, but can you at least give that eye contact that says, I see you're a human being. I see you're a diamond and you can shine. I acknowledge your existence. Are you paying attention? Because Matthew 5:8 says, blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. And the word see is horareo in Greek, H-O-R-A-O. And it means to attend to, right? Observe, to attend to in the Latin. Greek, they shall attend to. They shall see. They shall experience. They shall discern, perceive God. And when you read the Good Samaritan story, it has that word as well. They shall, the Good Samaritan, oradio, the person in need. They saw the person. They experienced the person. They paid attention. And so I want you to know that God speaks through his word, God speaks through creation, and God speaks through people. But are we paying attention? And especially God speaks through the people who the world has ignored. And so those with a pure heart see God, experience God, perceive God. They pay attention to the signs that God is sending them. And they pay attention to the people that God has placed his image on, his nature. And it's not called nature for a random reason. Go out into nature. It's the nature of God. And so you can get tons of wisdom, tons of instruction for your own life, just being in awareness of the wisdom that God invested into his creation, right? His canvas for you. And so my last point, as Wes comes up here to pray, right? or close us out, is really implementation. So here's a few things that you can do to implement this but as you go off into your week. Number one, take a rest. You can do a Sabbath. You can do a few hours resting. What does that look like? Take a rest. Number two, wonder walks or worship walks or expert walks. Take a walk. And I just read an article about a woman who takes a walk with an expert. So walking with a geologist, the geologist sees different things. Walking with a toddler sees different things. A biologist sees different things. And so now you're exposed to different perspectives of the way people are seeing that route that you take all the time and you miss it all. But now you are seeing it all. Metaphorically pray. This is something that I started last year. So when I pray over my home and I cover my home, when I touch the clock, I say, thank you, Lord, that you are a God of times and seasons. And thank you, Lord, that just the Chronos time and the Kairos time, right? That we are sensitive to the times and just whatever metaphorically. And then I touch the door, and then I metaphorically extract the essence of whatever the door is speaking to me. And so I metaphorically pray over my home by whatever physical thing I'm touching. That is a good way to practice how to think metaphorically. The next one is take up an art. Join a dance class. Take painting. It takes time to see. And those who have an arts background have a heightened experience in observation. And engage with the mundane. Just like you had to pick up your object and then you looked and you observed closer, do that with other things and then think about how it can teach you. And the last idea is use your VR, virtual reality. There's an app here that I do with my son, and it's called Skyview. And it shows you where all the planets are, by the way. And so I looked, Mercury is over there, Jupiter and Saturn are in that way. But when you take your app, you're like, oh, there it is. It puts things in perspective. So you not thinking that things are as bad as they are because the God of the Jupiter, you see it right there, the God of Jupiter who's watching the storm on Jupiter happen, he's watching you, and he's got you covered. So keep that in mind, that you can live a life of paying attention, and you know that God has got you covered, and God is communicating with you at all times. Thank you so much.
I love Skyview. I've been using Skyview for a couple years now. That app is awesome. It's very addictive. You can look up, and it just gives you a breakdown of all the different constellations and the stars and their placement. But thank you. Thank you for that message. And thank you for that call for us to have our eyes open and our ears open to pay attention to the messages that God is sending us. And when you're a listener, when you're a seer of what God is saying to you, you can also be a messenger for what God is saying to the other people, to help call them to the attention, to the plans that God is doing in their lives as well. So put your hands together. Thank you so much, Genein. That was such an incredible message. That was awesome. But before we leave today, I wanted to invite you guys to join us on Wednesday. We're going to have Bible study from 6:30 to 8. And if you go on our Life 150 app, you can get the directions and the address of the location that will be hosting this event. We've been doing it for a couple months now, and it is an incredible time to come together, go deeper, and pay attention to the word of the Lord. Thank you, guys.
Thanks for watching. We hope that you are blessed by the service. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you're watching us on YouTube. And we will catch you next week on Life 150 Live.